Professor Broman's Borderlands 4 review. Hi. It's been about 3 weeks since Borderlands 4 launched. I had a lot of traveling that I was doing, and I wanted to make sure that I got the totality of the game, or most of it, under my belt before I gave you my review. Now, right off the bat, here's a couple of things that we've got to say. One, yes, there was a tremendous amount of stability issues at launch. That sucked. Nobody liked that. But for my purposes, I'm going to be reviewing my experience, and I was one of the lucky people who had no issues. So we'll jump into it. I will give you my headline here, and then we'll talk about it, or I suppose defend it if you disagree with me. My review for Borderlands 4 is that this is, one, the best Borderlands game that they ever created, and two, it is a 10 out of 10 experience. From every moment of this game's experience for me, from the second you start on the beach with Claptrap to the moment you finish the game, all the reveals in there, all the side quests, all of the tiny open world ARPG quests that you get to do, the characters, the writing, the performances, everything is wholly Borderlands. This isn't like many other Borderlands games where I found myself immediately desiring things that existed in other parts of the franchise, right? Whether that was the incredible weapon rarity and diversity that we had in Borderlands 1, whether it is the really awesome loot tuning and skill trees that we experienced in Borderlands 2, the really fun and enjoyable butt slamming and zero gravity sections that we had in Borderlands the pre-sequel, and I'd say the movement and interaction with the world that we got in Borderlands 3. The best parts of every one of the Borderlands games is in Borderlands 4. If there is something that you enjoyed about one of the other Borderlands games, you're probably going to find its DNA in this game. And I know as a Borderlands fan, you've probably had a lot of experience with wishing that the game you were playing was a little bit different. And I understand that. One of my big benchmarks for this game that told me it was different right off the rip was that the second I booted it up, I wasn't wishing I was playing in one of the other games, right? Usually when you boot up a Borderlands game, or the feedback I get from the community is, hey, is this better than Borderlands 2? Hey, is this better than Borderlands 3? And it's gotten to the point where people have been incredibly, incredulous towards any suggestion that any Borderlands production could be better than whatever their favorite Borderlands iteration was. So let's break it. Let's break it down. A sequel to a game or a sequel to a franchise should include marked improvements from every iteration previously. And I think that Gearbox took big swings throughout the franchise history to see if these larger concepts really fit inside the game. I will use the Oz kit as an example. The Oz kit was super fun in the pre-sequel sometimes. Other times, the Oz kits and the overworld experience kind of felt like unnecessary artificial difficulty that didn't really ground the experience or bring a lot of fun to it. We did get an experience going back into zero gravity environment in Borderlands 4, and it was for a brief, section of the game, and that felt really good. That's an example of tuning something like that, turning it into a really enjoyable experience. So we've got this, what I feel like finally a complete amalgamation of all of the home run systems that we saw in the other iterations of Borderlands, all in one place. Now we can talk about Some other stuff. One, the skill trees and characters. I've spent a lot of time on Harlow, and I've spent a decent amount of time on Vex. I'm still leveling everything. But already the community has discovered a tremendous amount of really overpowered and fun builds. And I am glad that I waited to make this video, because this is also, I'm making this on the day of the first big patch. The first big patch isn't a sweep of nerfs built around using this knife to give all of the characters crazy crit damage. Borderlands, they've gone out, they've said, we're going to have a buff-focused patch. We're going to try and make everything rise up to a level of fun that we're seeing people experience if they're using the knife build or pick another build. I think this also shows great direction for the future of the game. So, characters. Everything I have played and all of the characters that I have watched has convinced me that this Borderlands game has done something that none of the other games have done for me, period. And that is, every single Vault Hunter is incredible. You could sort of see it in the initial polling of the game when it was coming out. Things were split. Everybody kind of fell, and it was like 25%, 25%, 25%, 25%. People didn't have an obvious strongest choice that they were leaning to. And I was really worried that, like, oh, okay, well, this is just going to mean that we'll figure out who's the best, and then everyone will be playing that character immediately after launch. And I didn't see that. It's 3 weeks out. We've got people who have hundreds and hundreds of hours already in the game, and we're still seeing that build diversity. We're seeing people discovering how different legendaries interact with different skills. We're seeing new skill tree builds come out. All sorts of awesome stuff that is, to me, very indicative of long-term health for the game. It means that as the game expands and grows and goes through its various cycles of being buffed and nerfed and patched, and as we get new Vault Hunters like Cash, we're going to continue to see a level of balance that feels meaningful. The other thing that I think that is driving this is the way that they've tuned loot. Loot is rare. Legendaries don't drop. Legendaries don't drop all the time. People have spent sizable amounts of time chasing just a drop. For me, I think I've spent 3 or 4 hours farming a boss just to get their dedicated drop once or twice, which feels appropriate. It feels like Borderlands 2 loot tuning, and I very much enjoy that. The upside of this is that getting the kind of gear that you're looking for with perfect parts and stuff like that isn't something that's guaranteed. It's not like you're going to have a huge bundle of stuff, of legendaries to go through after every farming session. And when you find that drop, or if you happen to drop a shiny, like I got my first one yesterday, it feels incredible. It feels like you got a shiny in Pokemon, which is what you're going for in a loot-based game. So the loot tuning to me makes Borderlands feel like its best self. I would use the example of, this is where you can see the DNA of Borderlands 2 in the game. Here's the big takeaway when it comes to loot for me. There's enough different manufacturers, there's enough different effects, and there's enough wackiness that every legendary that I have used so far seems to fill a super unique niche that you could probably build around with one of the characters. That, to me, feels like an ideal outcome. I know some people might disagree. They want I don't know why that guy flew across the map. They want every legendary to come out of the box and just absolutely crap on, everything that's on the screen. I don't know if that's the best way to go about it. but I enjoy the opportunity to look at the legendaries that we're getting and seeing, hey, is there a this guy is kicking my butt. Seeing, you know, like, how do I build around this as opposed to it just coming out of the box crazy overpowered, and then I take that and make it even more overpowered with my build, right? I like that it requires a little bit of thought. There's been, you know, and I even like that there have been some really interesting issues, like with Harlow in particular. I was one of the joyous experiencers of the universal generator glitch. This setup with these benefits
At least I didn't die.
makes radiation propagate on every enemy on your screen constantly until they explode and die, which can occasionally crash your game. I think it's great. I don't like that it crashes my game, but I love that there's stuff in here. There's mathematics in the game that allow this sort of runaway power. And runaway power is the ultimate end game if you're playing any sort of Diablo-esque loot. Like, you think of Diablo, you're thinking PoE, right? Which is definitely the vibe that I get from playing Borderlands, is that when I played Borderlands 1, it was very obvious that the goal outcome was, this is Diablo with guns. I feel like they've nailed that in Borderlands 4, whether that's with the weapons, whether that's with the character build opportunities, or honestly, the world itself. Seeing the diversity of enemies from the very start of the game, seeing enemies with modifications where they're healthier, they have a stim pack, or they have, you know, centrifugal, or all of these other buffs, makes the game feel more alive, makes each encounter feel more alive and more interesting, as opposed to just, you know, mobbing through the same group of enemies all the time. And sometimes you'll end up with some sort of invincible, impossible nonsense enemy that's harder for you to take down than a boss because of how your character's built out. I find that really incredible. It's really fun when the game can RNG itself into a position where it's screwing you over massively. I see that as the sign of a really good system that's not afraid to sort of go outside of its own box. There's probably a lot more that I could be talking about, but I don't want this to end up being a 30-minute video. So these are sort of my initial thoughts and reviews. Summing it up, Borderlands 4, 10 out of 10 experience. Easily the best Borderlands that they've ever created. It has the DNA of every other game. And the one thing I would like to highlight is that, as with all products that have long-term support, this is the smallest the game is ever going to be. And it's also, and I'm not using this in a derogatory way, this is the worst it will ever be, right? The game will improve with every iteration and update until it stops being supported. We already have a bunch of really cool stuff lined up between now and the end of the year for Borderlands, and that's not even counting everything that's going to be happening over the however long the lifespan is of the game. So what we have now is fantastic. And I think it's fair to assume, we see the same kind of growth in Borderlands 4 as we did in 2 or 3 when it comes to DLCs, and we're getting Headhunter packs and all this other stuff. Borderlands 4 is going to be a very healthy game to enjoy for a really decent chunk of time. I find myself thinking about this game when I'm not playing it, dreaming about it when I go to sleep, and hypothesizing about how things might work. I'm even considering and checking into speedrunning it again, because if it's a good speedrun, it'll be a great full circle moment for all of us. So Borderlands 4, I highly recommend it. If you need it to be more optimized before you pick it up, I totally understand. But when you have the opportunity to get it, you should pick it up. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to rate, comment, and subscribe, and I'll check you next time.